Given the increasing pervasiveness of automated content moderation systems, we might be curious as to how these systems are performing. In other words, are they actually blocking or moderating the things that a moderator might wish to have moderated? Are they underblocking? In other words, missing things that should be moderated? Are they overblocking? In other words, blocking or moderating things that shouldn't be moderated? It so happens that it would appear that many of these systems are very error-prone, but it's actually rather difficult to evaluate them in practice, and this is part of the problem. There's a distinct lack of transparency in how these systems operate. Automated content moderation is hard to assess. There's a lack of transparency in the operation of these systems, both in terms of the algorithms that are used and how they're trained, as well as how those algorithms interface with human decision makers, all remain black boxes. Any particular platform's algorithms are not known, and sometimes even the effects of moderation may be difficult to observe. Facebook's own CEO has been put to question several times in Congress on this particular topic and can appear to often give vague or contradictory answers to these types of questions, either presupposing that AI or machine learning will solve the problem without specifying exactly how it's going to do that, or, and in other cases, such as the situation with political ads, the descriptions have been confusing and often contradictory, sometimes suggesting that third-party fact-checkers are used, and in the same testimony suggesting that no moderation takes place whatsoever. One way of evaluating these systems is through so-called audit studies. We performed one of these studies on both Facebook and Google ads, using advertisements such as the one shown that are intended to test whether the system would mistakenly flag these particular ads as political. In addition to auditing issue ads, we also audited ads that contained the names of political candidates, but were in fact not political ads at all, to see whether the platforms mistakenly flagged these particular ads as political ads. One can see in the case of non-political issue ads that sometimes Facebook mistakenly blocked these ads. Google, on the other hand, permitted the ads, but we actually failed to succeed in seeing any instance where Google blocked any ad whatsoever. And so it would appear that Google's moderation system is overly permissive. In the case of Facebook as well, we also saw some mistaken blocking actions for products that share a name with a political candidate. You can see here that there are certain types of ads on particular platforms for which there was some amount of blocking that shouldn't have taken place at all. So here's a particular case where Facebook mistakenly mischaracterized about 25% of the ads placed as issue-based ads when in fact the ad was not political at all. Additionally, we observed regular blocking of ads for national holidays, national parks, and nonpartisan products that share candidate names. It's clear that these systems are imperfect, and as a result, the CEOs of these companies are facing harsh questioning from lawmakers and regulators about what to do about it, concerning what to do about it. Even as recently as January 2021, it would appear that the CEOs of these platforms really don't have much of an idea of how to tackle this problem. Here's an example where the CEO of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, suggested that personalization algorithms might be the solution. But as you can see in this particular demonstration that we're showing on the slide, personalized search can also be polluted. Here's an example showing that if we pollute a user's search history with a particular search for Macy's shoes, the search for Macy's shoes goes from the second page, as we've shown here, where you can see the result about halfway down on the second page. And here we pollute the search profile, unbeknownst to the user. But if you look at the user's search history, the search history now contains searches for things like Macy's shoes. When a user returns to search for shoes, that result that was previously on the second page has now been moved to the first page as a result of Google's personalization algorithm that uses search history to help place results. Personalization can, of course, create other types of problems such as filter bubbles, which we'll explore in later weeks. But as we just saw, even in the best case scenario, personalization can be subject to attack. And so simply suggesting that personalization will be the solution to content moderation problems that we're seeing is certainly a bit premature and maybe even a bit naive. As we think about the role of AI and platform or content moderation looking ahead, we're going to need to better understand what the capabilities and limitations of these technologies are, so we can understand and mitigate bad inputs to personalization, such as the one we just saw, as well as understanding and pushing the limits of automated filtering. We also need better mechanisms to both observe and audit the platforms. In terms of policy, it's important to understand these technical capabilities and limitations so that the laws and regulations can be written with the feasibility of implementation and enforcement in mind. There are a bunch of open questions in this area, including what are the pros and cons of automated filtering? How could you envision technology companies using these types of technologies as part of a more holistic approach that involves humans in the loop? Pursuant to the technical capabilities and limitations, we can also ask whether these companies should be required to use them in any way, and whether the requirement or mandate to use such automated filtering systems, some of which may cost money to license, might introduce further barriers to entry for upstarts or startups who may not be able to afford the content moderation systems. Another reasonable question to ask is what types of content are reasonable or technically feasible to moderate, and who should ultimately shoulder the burden of detecting various types of offensive content.